They thought if they all came together, they could finally dim your light. The whole community whispered, schemed, and coordinated their attacks like a military operation designed to erase you. They spread rumors in group chats, held secret meetings about your name, and convinced each other that bringing you down was somehow justified. But here's what they didn't calculate. Chosen one. Every stone they threw at you wasn't breaking you down. It was building your monument. Every lie they spread wasn't staining your reputation. It was polishing your truth until it shined so bright they couldn't look directly at it anymore. And now they're sitting in the ruins of their own schemes, watching in horror as the very attacks meant to destroy you have become the foundation of your undeniable glory. You need to understand something fundamental about how the universe operates. When mediocre minds unite against excellence, they're not demonstrating strength, they're confessing weakness. If you were truly ordinary, if your presence didn't threaten their comfortable illusions, they would have ignored you completely. But they couldn't. Your authenticity disrupted their performance. Your silence exposed their noise. Your peace revealed their chaos. So they did what insecure people always do when confronted with something they can't control. They tried to destroy it. But destruction only works on things built on lies. And you, chosen one, were built on something they could never touch. Truth. Before we go deeper, if this message is already resonating with your spirit, hit that like button right now. And if you're serious about standing with others who refuse to be dimmed by jealous attacks, subscribe to this channel immediately. Every time you engage, you're telling the algorithm that more chosen ones need to hear this truth. You're not just watching a video, you're joining a movement of people who understand that attacks from the envious are actually certificates of authenticity. Now drop the word untouchable in the comments if you've felt the shift, if you've watched your enemies scramble as their schemes backfired, if you've seen how their jealousy only elevated you higher. Let's start with the most obvious confession they made without even realizing it. They had to recruit. They had to gather reinforcements. They had to convince others to join their cause because facing you individually was too terrifying. Think about what that actually means. A single person living in their truth, minding their business, building in silence, required an entire community to even attempt taking them down. That's not a sign of your weakness. That's a declaration of your power. When one wolf hunts a rabbit, it hunts alone. But when a pack circles a lion, it's because they know that lion could tear any single one of them apart. You've been that lion. Chosen one, whether you recognized it or not. Your calm presence in rooms full of chaos made them uncomfortable. Your refusal to participate in their gossip games made you unpredictable. Your ability to succeed without seeking their approval made you dangerous to their system of control. So they did what weak people always do. They found others who felt equally threatened and formed an alliance built entirely on fear. Not respect, not shared values, not genuine connection, just pure, unfiltered fear of someone they couldn't manipulate or diminish. Imagine the conversations they must have had behind closed doors. We need to do something about them. They're getting too much attention. People are starting to notice them more than us. We can't let them keep rising like this. Every word dripping with insecurity. Every sentence confirming what they'd never admit out loud. You were the standard they couldn't meet. So instead of elevating themselves, they tried to lower you. But here's the beautiful irony. The moment they united against you, they united everyone's attention on you. They thought they were building an army. What they actually built was your audience. Psychology proves this pattern repeats throughout history. When groups form specifically to oppose one individual, they inadvertently make that individual significant. They transform a person into a symbol. Every attack becomes free advertising. Every scheme generates curiosity. Every whisper makes people wonder, what is it about this person that requires so much effort to bring down? And when curious minds investigate, they don't find the monster your enemies described. They find someone who stayed dignified while being attacked, someone who kept building while being torn down, someone who remained calm while chaos swirled around them. That contrast destroys the narrative your enemies worked so hard to create. They mistook your quiet for defeat. They interpreted your lack of response as inability to defend yourself. They assumed silence meant you were cornered, broken, or too afraid to fight back. But chosen one, your silence was never about fear. It was about wisdom. You understood something they couldn't grasp. Not every accusation deserves a response. Not every lie requires a defense. Not every attack needs a counterattack. Sometimes the most powerful move is to stand completely still and let your accusers exhaust themselves, screaming at a version of you that only exists in their imagination. Think about it. While they were burning energy coordinating attacks, spreading rumors, and maintaining their web of lies, what were you doing? You were building, creating, improving, growing, healing. Every hour they spent obsessing over you was an hour they weren't investing in their own progress. Every conversation dedicated to your downfall was a conversation that could have elevated their own lives. But they chose differently. They chose to make you their full-time occupation while you barely gave them a part-time thought. That imbalance alone guaranteed their failure. Your silence also did something they never anticipated. It created space for truth to speak. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you force people to investigate for themselves. When you don't engage in public battles, observers have to form their own opinions based on your actions, not your arguments. And what did they see when they looked at your life without the filter of your enemy's lies? They saw consistency. They saw results. They saw someone who walked their talk, even when walking meant walking alone. Your life became your testimony, and testimonies written in action are far more convincing than anything spoken in defense. There's an ancient principle at work here that your enemies don't comprehend. The oak tree doesn't argue with the storm. It bends when it must, stands firm when it can, and after the storm passes, it's still rooted while broken branches from weaker trees litter the ground. You were that oak. They were the storm that thought noise equaled power. But storms are temporary. Roots are permanent. Their attacks had an expiration date. Your foundation doesn't. Here's what they failed to calculate in their master plan. Every lie they told about you said more about them than it ever said about you. Every rumor they spread revealed their own insecurities. Every scheme they hatched exposed their desperation. They thought they were building a case against you. What they actually built was a confession of their own moral bankruptcy. Because people who are secure in their own value don't spend time tearing others down. People who are confident in their own path don't need to block someone else's road. People who are genuinely successful don't waste energy sabotaging someone else's success. The very nature of their attacks became evidence against them. They claimed you were arrogant, yet they were the ones who couldn't handle someone else receiving recognition. They said you were manipulative, yet they were the ones coordinating secret campaigns. They called you fake, yet they were the ones wearing masks of concern while sharpening knives behind their backs. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a blade, and eventually people started noticing. The same community members they recruited to hate you began asking questions. Wait, why are we so focused on this one person? What did they actually do? And why does this feel more like jealousy than justice? Those questions were your vindication arriving right on schedule. Because truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep lies try to bury it. Your enemies were so focused on controlling the narrative that they forgot people have eyes. They can see patterns. They can recognize when someone is being targeted, not for their actions, but for their impact. And the more your enemies pushed their agenda, the more transparent their motives became. They weren't protecting the community. They were protecting their position. They weren't concerned about truth. They were concerned about competition. Imagine how it must feel for them now. Every person who initially believed the lies, but later discovered the truth, became a walking reminder of their dishonesty. Every scheme that backfired became another weight on their conscience. Every attack that made you stronger became another regret they'll carry. They thought they were writing your ending. What they actually wrote was their own reputation's obituary. And the beautiful part? You didn't have to do anything to make that happen. Their actions spoke for themselves. Their obsession revealed everything. Their jealousy became the spotlight that showed the world exactly who they were. Mathematics doesn't work the same way in the spiritual realm as it does on paper. They looked at their group and saw strength in numbers. 10 voices against 1, 20 opinions drowning out a single truth. A whole community unified in one direction. To them, it looked like an unstoppable force, but they forgot a fundamental principle. Quantity without quality is just noise. 1,000 people can be wrong simultaneously. 1,000,000 voices can echo the same lie. But one person standing in truth carries more weight than an army built on deception. You became living proof of this principle. While they gathered their forces and coordinated their attacks, you stood alone in your integrity. While they needed validation from each other to feel confident in their stance, you needed nothing but the certainty that you'd lived honorably. While they required constant reinforcement of the narrative to keep believing it, you simply existed in your truth without effort. And that ease, that natural authenticity, is what ultimately defeated them, because lies require maintenance. Truth just is. Think about how much energy they expended. Planning meetings, strategy sessions, damage control when their stories didn't align, backup lies to cover the first lies, explanations for why the evidence didn't match their claims. It was exhausting work maintaining a false reality. Meanwhile, you woke up every day and simply lived. You didn't have to remember which version of events you told to which person. You didn't have to coordinate your story with others. You didn't have to defend contradictions, because there were no contradictions. Your life was your defense, and it never needed rehearsal. The community eventually noticed this too. They saw how much effort your enemies put into their attacks versus how little effort you put into your defense. That disproportion told its own story. Guilty people scramble. Innocent people stand still. Liars need elaborate explanations. Truth needs only time. And time, chosen one, was always on your side. Every day that passed without their predicted downfall happening weakened their credibility. Every week you continued succeeding despite their schemes proved their narrative false. Every month you remained unbothered while they remained obsessed, showed the world who actually had the power. This is where the story gets poetic. They attacked you, hoping to prevent your rise, but their attacks became the exact catalyst that launched you higher. Every obstacle they placed in your path forced you to develop new skills. Every door they tried to close pushed you to create new opportunities. Every ally they turned against you cleared space for better connections. They thought they were sabotaging your journey. What they actually did was accelerate your evolution. You didn't just survive their attacks, you transformed through them. There's a reason pressure creates diamonds. Comfort creates complacency. You were being pressured from all sides, and instead of crumbling, you crystallized. Every false accusation forced you to get clearer on your truth. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every coordinated attack showed you who really had your back. You emerged from their warfare, not just intact, but improved. Stronger, wiser, more focused, more certain of your path. And that transformation is what haunts them now. They can't celebrate your downfall because it never happened. They can't claim victory because you're clearly winning. All they can do is watch in frustrated silence as you rise to levels they'll never reach. The cruelest part for them is that your success doesn't even feel like revenge. You're not gloating. You're not rubbing it in their faces. You're simply living your best life, completely unbothered by their existence. That indifference is more devastating to them than any comeback you could have crafted, because it proves what they feared most. You never needed them. Not their approval, not their acceptance, not their permission. You were always going to rise. Their attacks just determined whether you'd rise bitter or better. You chose better. And that choice is why their punishment isn't something you inflict. It's something they experience every time they see your name attached to new achievements. They wanted to be the reason you failed. Instead, they became the reason you developed unshakable resilience. They wanted to be the force that stopped you. Instead, they became the resistance that made you stronger. They wanted to write your tragedy. Instead, they became a footnote in your victory story. That's not just karma, that's poetry. The universe took their weapons and transformed them into your tools. Their attacks became your training. Their hatred became your fuel. Their jealousy became your confirmation that you were moving in the right direction. Here's the truth that might sting before it liberates. The people who so easily believed lies about you were never your people to begin with. Real community doesn't abandon you at the first rumor. Genuine connections don't dissolve because someone whispered doubt. True allies investigate before they judge. The fact that they turned so quickly reveals something important. They were never connected to the real you. They were connected to their idea of you. And the moment that idea was challenged, they had no foundation to stand on. This realization is actually your freedom. You've been trying to maintain relationships with people who never truly knew you. You've been seeking acceptance from a community that only valued you when you fit their expectations. You've been mourning the loss of connections that were conditional from the start, but chosen one. Their departure wasn't your loss, it was your liberation. They removed themselves from your path, making room for people who will love you for your truth, not tolerate you despite it. They did you a favor, disguised as a betrayal. Think about it. Would you really want people in your inner circle who believe lies without verification? Would you trust your back to people who abandon you based on gossip? Would you value connections that crumble under the slightest pressure? The community you're building now, the one forming around your authenticity and resilience, is built on a completely different foundation. These are people who see your character through your actions. These are allies who investigate before they judge. These are connections that get stronger under pressure instead of dissolving. The old community served its purpose. It taught you discernment. It showed you the difference between real and fake. It revealed who celebrates your success and who secretly hopes for your failure. Those were valuable lessons, even if they came through painful experiences. But now you're operating on a different frequency. You're attracting people who match your growth, your values, your vision. And the beautiful part is, you didn't have to chase them. They found you because your light, the same light your enemies tried to dim, became a beacon for your true tribe. They wanted to make your name synonymous with scandal. Instead, they made it synonymous with resilience. They wanted people to whisper your name in shame. Instead, people speak it with respect. They wanted your story to be a cautionary tale. Instead, it became an inspiration. Every attack they launched, every rumor they spread, every scheme they coordinated backfired so spectacularly that your name is now associated with the exact opposite of what they intended. You're not the villain they tried to paint. You're the survivor who refused to be broken. You're the example of what happens when integrity faces jealousy and wins. Your story is being told in circles you don't even know about. People who faced similar attacks now reference you as proof that truth prevails. Communities dealing with toxic behavior point to your journey as evidence that staying authentic pays off. Individuals doubting whether silent dignity beats loud defense look at your outcome and find their answer. You've become more than just a person who survived gossip. You've become a symbol, a representation of the principle that your character can withstand any attack if it's built on truth. This legendary status wasn't something you sought. You never asked to be an example. You just wanted to live your life in peace. But the universe had different plans. Your enemies, in their jealous rage, accidentally positioned you as the protagonist in a story that needed to be told. They created the conflict that made your victory meaningful. They provided the darkness that made your light visible. They built the stage, gathered the audience, and then watched in horror as you delivered a performance they never expected. You rising anyway. Now your name carries weight. It never would have carried without their attacks. People respect struggle that leads to triumph. They admire resilience that doesn't turn bitter. They celebrate victories that come through integrity rather than revenge. And you, chosen one, embodied all of that. Your enemies wanted to erase your name from conversations. Instead, they ensured it will be remembered long after theirs are forgotten. They wanted to end your story. Instead, they made it worth telling. And every time someone shares your journey, every time your name is spoken as encouragement to someone else facing attacks, their defeat becomes more complete. So here you stand, chosen one, not broken by their attacks but refined by them, not defeated by their schemes but defined by how you handled them, not diminished by their jealousy but elevated by your response to it. Every stone they threw built your foundation higher. Every lie they spread made your truth shine brighter. Every attack they coordinated made your peace more obvious. They gave you everything you needed to become legendary, and they're only now realizing what they've done. Let them sit in that realization. Let them watch as you continue to rise. Let them feel the weight of knowing they could have been part of your story as allies, but chose instead to be footnotes as enemies. Your glory isn't despite their attacks. In many ways, it's because of them. They provided the resistance that built your strength. They created the pressure that formed your diamond. They launched the attacks that proved your resilience. And now they have to live with the fact that their jealousy became the very tool the universe used to elevate you beyond their reach. If this message resonated with your spirit, make sure you've hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're building a community of people who understand that attacks from the jealous are actually confirmations of your impact. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone facing their own coordinated attacks, someone doubting whether staying true is worth it. And drop "My glory shines" in the comments to claim this truth as your own reality. Remember, chosen one, they thought they were dimming your light. They had no idea they were just polishing it. Your glory was always going to shine. They just made sure the whole world would see it. Stay strong, stay true, and watch as your enemies become your greatest unpaid promoters. This is your time. Own it.